The massive space station Kepler's watch floated quietly in the darkness of deep space, its sensors constantly scanning the galaxy for any signs of trouble. For weeks, everything had been normal, just the usual cosmic background noise and routine patrol reports. Technician Ralvi sat at his monitoring console, sipping his morning stimulant drink and watching the endless stream of data flow across his screens. Then something changed. A weak signal appeared on his display, flickering in and out like a dying candle. Ralvi's four eyes widened as he analyzed the transmission. This wasn't just any signal. It was a distress beacon, and it was coming from the most dangerous place in known space. "Commander Thexan," Ralvi called out, his voice cracking with excitement and fear. "You need to see this immediately." The tall, blue-skinned commander strode over to the technician's station, his military boots clicking against the metal floor. When he saw the data on the screen, his normally calm expression turned grave. "The Cathera Nebula," Thexan muttered, reading the coordinates. "Nothing comes back from there alive." The nebula was legendary throughout the galaxy for all the wrong reasons. It was a twisted maze of deadly radiation storms, crushing gravitational fields, and space-time distortions that could tear a starship apart in seconds. Even the most advanced vessels of the Galactic Council avoided the region completely. It was marked on every star chart with warning symbols that basically said, "Enter and die." "The signal is definitely Vellani," Ralvi confirmed, his fingers dancing across the controls. "It's their research ship, Gentle Current. They've been missing for 6 full cycles now." Commander Thexan's heart sank. The Vellani were one of the most peaceful species in the galaxy, gentle plant lovers who spent their time studying flowers and developing new medicines. They were brilliant scientists, but terrible fighters. If they were trapped in the nebula, they wouldn't last long. "Sir, we have to do something," Ralvi pleaded. "That ship is carrying Dr. Korvik's entire research team. Their work on cellular regeneration could save millions of lives across the galaxy." The commander stared at the swirling image of the deadly nebula on the main screen. He knew the regulations by heart. The Galactic Council had already sent 3 different rescue missions into that cosmic graveyard. All 3 ships had vanished completely, leaving behind nothing but scattered debris and unanswered questions. Protocol was clear right off the crew as casualties and move on, but the research data aboard the Gentle Current was irreplaceable. Dr. Korvik and his team had spent decades developing new treatments for diseases that plagued dozens of worlds. Their botanical research could revolutionize medicine throughout the galaxy. Losing that knowledge would be a tragedy beyond measure. Thexan stood in silence for long minutes, weighing impossible choices. Send another council ship to certain death, or abandon the Vellani to their fate. Neither option felt right. Then a terrible idea began forming in his mind. There was one more option, one that made every rational part of his brain scream in protest. "There is one possibility," he said slowly, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. "The quarantined Sol system." The entire bridge fell dead silent. Every alien present turned to stare at their commander with expressions of shock and horror. Even the normally busy hum of the station's computers seemed to quiet down, as if the machines themselves were afraid. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the humans, the terrifying Deathworlders from the 3rd planet of Sol. They came from a world so savage and hostile that it had turned them into natural-born killers. Their home planet was a nightmare of extreme weather, deadly predators, and toxic environments that would kill most civilized species in hours. 20 years ago, when the Council first made contact with Earth, the results had been catastrophic. The humans had reacted with typical violence, attacking the peaceful diplomatic mission and nearly starting an interstellar war. Since then, they had been completely quarantined, locked away in their own solar system, like dangerous animals in a cage. "Commander, you can't be serious," Ralvi whispered, his voice trembling. "They're monsters. savage beasts who solve every problem with violence and bloodshed. The stories about humans were legendary throughout the galaxy, tales of a species that had conquered their own world through endless warfare, that treated pain as weakness and death as just another challenge to overcome. They were said to be so aggressive that they actually enjoyed fighting, so ruthless that they would sacrifice anything to achieve their goals. But as Thexan stared at the distress signal from the doomed Villani ship, he realized they were out of options. The nebula had already claimed 3 Council rescue vessels. Conventional ships simply couldn't survive in that hellish environment. Maybe what they needed wasn't a civilized response. Maybe they needed something as dangerous as the nebula itself, with trembling claws. The commander activated the emergency communication system and began composing a message to Earth. As he typed, he wondered if he was about to unleash something far worse than the natural dangers of the Cathara Nebula. The transmission shot across space toward the quarantined Sol system, carrying with it the desperate hope that sometimes monsters could be heroes. Captain Jiho was reviewing maintenance reports in his small office aboard Luna Station when the priority message arrived. The encrypted transmission carried the official seal of the Galactic Council, something no human had seen in 20 years. His weathered fingers, scarred from decades of deep space missions, remained perfectly steady as he decoded the message that would change everything. The content was simple, but earth-shattering. A rescue mission, a chance for humanity to prove they belonged among the stars. After 2 decades of isolation, of being treated like dangerous animals locked in a cage, the galaxy was finally asking for their help. Jiho closed his eyes and took a deep breath. This wasn't just another mission, it was humanity's one shot at redemption. If they succeeded, Earth might finally be welcomed back into galactic civilization. If they failed, the quarantine would probably last forever. Lieutenant Minho report. To my office immediately. He spoke into his communicator. His second-in-command arrived within minutes, still wearing grease-stained coveralls from the engine room. Minho had served with Jiho for 15 years, through corporate wars and pirate raids that had tested their courage in ways most people couldn't imagine. "Sir, what's the situation?" Minho asked, noticing the serious expression on his captain's face. "We're going back to work," Jiho said simply, handing over the decoded message. "Real work. A rescue mission in the Cathara Nebula." Minho's eyes widened as he read. Everyone knew about the nebula. It was basically a ship graveyard where even the most advanced alien vessels went to die. But more importantly, this was their chance to show the galaxy that humans were more than just violent savages. "Full crew assembly?" Minho asked. "The best we have," Jiho confirmed. "This isn't a training exercise. Lives are on the line, and so is our entire species' future. Within hours, Luna Station buzzed with activity as the cream of Earth's space personnel gathered for the most important mission in human history. The Indomitable, humanity's most advanced rescue vessel, was prepped and loaded with equipment designed specifically for the harshest environments in space. Engineer Hunwoo arrived first, carrying his toolkit and wearing his lucky jacket, the same one he'd worn when designing the atmospheric processors that allowed humans to work in Venus's crushing, acidic environment. His modifications had saved countless lives in mining operations throughout the solar system. Medic Sumen came next, her medical bags packed with both human and alien medical supplies. She'd spent years studying xenobiology through intercepted council databases, preparing for the day when humanity might encounter other species again. Her knowledge of alien physiology was probably better than most council doctors. Pilot Kung-Su showed up with his usual confident grin. Despite the magnitude of their mission, he could thread a needle with a spacecraft and had once navigated through an asteroid field during a solar storm when all the sensors were down. If anyone could fly through the nightmarish conditions of the Cathara Nebula, it was him. Marine Sergeant Hannah was last to arrive, but her reputation preceded her. She'd ended 3 separate corporate wars through pure tactical brilliance, turning hopeless situations into decisive victories. Her strategies were studied in military academies across Earth's colonies as the Indomitable prepared for launch. Communications Officer Jisoo picked up transmissions from deep space. The Galactic Council was in heated debate about their decision to contact Earth. Many alien species were furious that the savage Deathworlders had been unleashed. "Listen to this," Jisoo said, playing the intercepted transmissions over the bridge speakers. "This is madness," one alien voice complained. "Humans are unpredictable killers. They'll probably attack the very people they're supposed to rescue. They come from a world so violent it breeds natural-born monsters," another voice added. "We should have left that research ship to its fate, rather than risk letting these beasts loose." The bridge fell quiet as the crew listened to species after species describe humans as barely controlled savages who solved every problem with violence. After 20 years of isolation, the galaxy still saw them as nothing more than dangerous animals. Captain Jiho looked around at his crew, these brave, skilled individuals who had volunteered to risk their lives, saving strangers from a species that had treated them like monsters. Each of them was among the finest humans had to offer, yet the galaxy expected them to fail. "Well," Team Jiho said with a slight smile, "they expect us to fail spectacularly. They think we're too savage and stupid to pull off a real rescue mission." He paused, looking each crew member in the eye. "Let's prove them wrong." The Indomitable launched from Luna Station, carrying humanity's hopes and dreams toward the most dangerous region of known space. Behind them, Earth watched and waited, knowing that the next few days would determine whether humans would remain galactic outcasts forever, or finally take their place among the stars as equals. The ship turned toward the distant Cathera Nebula, where death waited, alongside the slim chance of redemption. The first glimpse of the Cathera Nebula made even the experienced crew of the Indomitable fall silent in awe and terror. Through the main viewport, they could see a cosmic nightmare stretching across millions of kilometers, swirling clouds of superheated gas, painted in brilliant purples and deadly oranges, shot through with lightning bolts that could power entire planets. "My God," whispered Communications Officer Jisoo, watching the spectacular light show ahead of them. "It's beautiful and terrifying at the same time." Pilot Kyung-soo's hands tightened on the controls as his instruments began screaming warnings. Every sensor on the ship was lighting up red, detecting hazards that would instantly destroy most vessels. Gravitational fields strong enough to stretch a ship like taffy, radiation levels that would cook a crew in minutes, magnetic storms that could scramble every electronic system aboard. "Entering the outer edge now," Kyung-soo announced, his voice steady, despite the sweat running down his face. "All hands, prepare for rough passage." The Indomitable shuddered as it hit the first wave of charged particles. The hull, forged in Earth's orbital shipyards from metals mined in the asteroid belt, groaned under stresses that would have torn apart the fancy council vessels. But it held together, just as its human designers had intended. Hull temperature rising to critical levels, Engineer Hyunwoo reported from his station, fingers flying over the controls as he rerouted power to the cooling systems. "But we're still in one piece. These old Earth hulls are tougher than they look." As they pushed deeper into the nebula, the real dangers became apparent. Gravitational whirlpools spun through space like invisible tornadoes, capable of crushing a starship into a marble-sized ball of compressed metal. Streams of deadly radiation flowed between them like rivers of death, while massive chunks of stellar debris tumbled through the chaos at incredible speeds, reading massive gravitational distortions at Mark 77. Kyung-soo called out, wrestling with the controls as the ship bucked and twisted through the cosmic storm. Whatever created this place really didn't want visitors. Captain G studied the tactical display, watching as their sensors painted a picture of destruction that stretched in all directions. The wreckage of previous ships floated past them, twisted metal fragments that had once been proud council vessels. Now nothing more than space junk spinning endlessly through the void. No wonder the council ships couldn't make it through. Marine Sergeant Hannah observed grimly. This place is designed to kill anything that enters. Their ships are built for comfort and efficiency, not for surviving hell itself. But the Indomitable kept pushing forward, its crew drawing on decades of experience operating in Earth's harshest environments. They'd learned to survive in the crushing depths of Earth's oceans, the toxic atmosphere of Venus, and the frozen wastelands of the outer planets. This nebula was just another hostile environment to conquer. Deep in the heart of the cosmic maelstrom, their long-range sensors finally detected what they'd come to find. The gentle current, the missing Villani research vessel, hung helplessly in space like a broken toy. But their relief quickly turned to horror as they realized the ship's situation. "Found them?" Kyung-soo announced, his voice tight with concern. "But we've got a serious problem." The Villani ship was trapped in a decaying orbit around a neutron star, one of the most dangerous objects in the universe. The stellar remnant was barely 20 kilometers across, but contained more mass than Earth's sun, creating a gravitational field so intense that it warped space and time itself. "They're caught in the gravity well," Medic Suman announced, studying the bio-readings from the alien ship. "Life signs are weak, but present. They're alive, but barely hanging on." The neutron star's immense gravity was slowly, but inevitably pulling the gentle current toward its surface, where the crew would be crushed into atomic paste in microseconds. The orbital decay was accelerating as the ship spiraled closer to the stellar graveyard. Estimate 43 minutes until they hit the event horizon. Hyunwoo calculated, his engineering mind working furiously on the problem. After that, nothing in the universe can save them. Captain Jiho stared at the tactical display, weighing their options. They could try to grab the ship with their tractor beam, but at this distance, and with the neutron star's interference, it would be like trying to catch a falling feather in a hurricane. "I can extend a gravitic tether," Hyunwoo said suddenly, his eyes bright with a desperate idea. "But we'll have to match their orbital decay exactly. We'd essentially be falling toward the neutron star alongside them." The bridge fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. One tiny miscalculation, one moment of hesitation, and both ships would be pulled into the stellar crusher. They would all be compressed into neutronium, matter so dense that a teaspoon would weigh as much as a mountain. "How long would we have?" Jiho asked quietly. "Maybe 15 minutes to grab them and pull out," Hyunwoo replied. "And that's if everything goes perfectly." Jisoo looked up from her communications console with fear in her eyes. "Sir, we could die, all of us. Is saving these aliens worth risking human lives?" Captain Jiho looked around at his crew, these brave souls who had volunteered for humanity's most important mission. Each of them knew the risks, knew they might not make it home, but they also knew that sometimes doing the right thing meant taking impossible chances. "Do it," Jiho ordered firmly. The rescue began with humanity dancing on the edge of oblivion, betting their lives against the most violent forces in the universe. Dr. Korvik's forearms trembled as he heard the docking clamps engage with a metallic thud that echoed through the dying corridors of the gentle current. For 6 cycles, he and his research team had been trapped in the emergency shelter, watching their life support systems fail one by one. They had accepted death as inevitable. Until now, the stories about humans flooded back to his mind like a nightmare he couldn't escape. Every Villani child grew up hearing whispered tales of the savage bipeds from the death world called Earth. They were said to be monsters who enjoyed violence, creatures so brutal that they had conquered their own planet through endless warfare. The Galactic Council had quarantined them for good reason. They were simply too dangerous to be allowed among civilized species. When the airlock hissed open and the first human stepped through, Dr. Korvik pressed himself against the far wall of the shelter. His research team, 12 of the galaxy's most brilliant botanical scientists huddled behind him like frightened seedlings. They had expected to die from system failure, but now they faced something potentially worse. The lead human was smaller than the stories suggested, wearing medical insignia on her rescue suit. Through his translator device, she spoke words that made no sense given everything he'd been taught about her species. "We're here to help," Medic Sumin said softly, her voice carrying a gentleness that seemed impossible. "My name is Sumin R. Any of you injured?" Dr. Korvik stared at her in confusion. Where was the violence? The immediate demands for surrender? According to council briefings, humans should have already started enslaving them, or worse. Instead, this human female was slowly approaching with what appeared to be medical equipment, moving carefully, as if she didn't want to frighten them. "Please don't hurt us," whispered Dr. Yilin, one of his younger researchers. "We'll cooperate. Just don't hurt the seedlings." Suman's expression softened even further as she noticed the 3 Villani children cowering in the corner, young scientists. Barely past their first flowering, who had been trapped aboard when the ship was damaged. "No one is going to hurt anyone," she said firmly, kneeling down to their eye level. "We're here to take you home safely." Over the next few hours, Dr. Korvik watched in growing bewilderment as his understanding of humans crumbled completely. These supposed monsters worked tirelessly to repair their failing life support systems, sharing their own food rations when they learned the Villani hadn't eaten in 2 cycles. Engineer Hunwu spent hours explaining the repair work to Dr. Korvik's team, treating the alien scientists as equals rather than prisoners. The most shocking moment came when Marine Sergeant Hannah, described in council records as a trained killer, who had ended 3 wars, sat down during her rest period with a botanical database pad. She was reading about Villani plant research to one of the frightened children, her voice patient and kind as she helped the young alien understand complex cellular structures. "You're not what we were told," Dr. Korvik finally said to Captain Jiho, as they watched the repairs progress. "The council warned us that humans were savage Deathworlders who solved every problem with violence." Jiho paused in his work on the navigation systems, a sad smile crossing his weathered face. "I imagine they told you we were monsters." "Yes," Dr. Korvik admitted, his translator conveying his embarrassment. "Your species designation in our databases lists Earth as a Class 12 death world. We were taught that such environments only produce killers and conquerors." The human captain was quiet for a long moment, looking around at his crew as they worked alongside the Villani scientists. Pilot Kung-Su was teaching a young researcher how to read star charts. Communications officer Jisoo was helping repair the alien ship's translation systems. Every human aboard was treating their former enemies with respect and kindness. "Earth is harsh," Jiho acknowledged slowly. "We have predators that could tear apart most galactic species, whether that can kill in minutes. Diseases and disasters that test us constantly." Dr. Korvik's antennae drooped. "Then it's true. Your world did create killers." "No," Jiho said firmly, meeting the alien's compound eyes. "It created protectors. Harsh worlds don't just breed survivors. They teach us that life is precious. They show us that the strong must shield the weak, because we've all been weak at some point." The botanist watched Medic Sumin carefully treating a minor injury on one of his researchers, her hands gentle and sure. He observed Marine Hannah sharing her meal rations with the hungry children, even though it meant less food for herself. "Your species has been isolated for 20 years, Dr. Korvik said quietly. "The council painted you as monsters to justify the quarantine. But you're not monsters at all, are you?" "We're just people trying to do the right thing," Jiho replied. "Maybe that's what your council was really afraid of." As the hours passed and the repairs continued, Dr. Korvik began to realize the terrible truth. The Galactic Council hadn't quarantined humans because they were violent savages. They had been isolated because they represented something the established order couldn't control. a species that put moral principles above political convenience. That would risk everything to save strangers. The botanist looked around at the humans working selflessly to save his people, and wondered what other lies the council had spread about these remarkable creatures from the death world called Earth. The celebration of successful repairs was cut short when Communications Officer Jesu's console erupted in urgent warning signals. Her face went pale as she studied the long-range sensor readings, double-checking the data that made her stomach drop with dread. "Captain, we have incoming contacts," she announced, her voice tight with concern. "Multiple vessels approaching from the nebula's outer edge. Configuration suggests heavy military armament." Captain Jiho moved swiftly to her station, studying the sensor display that showed 12 dark shapes pushing through the cosmic storm. Unlike the Indomitable, which had struggled through the nebula's dangers, these ships moved with predatory confidence through the hazardous space. "Can you identify them?" Jiho asked, though something in his gut already knew this wasn't a rescue mission. Jisu's fingers flew over her translation protocols, cross-referencing the ship's signatures against known galactic databases. When the results appeared, her worst fears were confirmed. "Hegemony Raiders," she announced grimly. "Full military configuration with enhanced weapon systems." "Sir, they're definitely not here for rescue operations." The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of life support systems. Everyone knew about the Hegemony, a militant faction that had been terrorizing the Outer Rim territories for years. They were ruthless pirates who attacked peaceful research vessels and civilian transports, stealing technology and enslaving crews. Dr. Korvik, who had been observing the human rescue operations with growing admiration, suddenly understood the horrible truth. His antennae drooped in despair as the pieces of a deadly puzzle fell into place. "The research data," he whispered, his voice barely audible through the translator. "Our bioweapon countermeasures. They've been tracking us this entire time." The Villani botanist's worst nightmare was becoming reality. His team hadn't been lost. In an accident, they had been deliberately hunted. The gentle current carried years of research into biological warfare defenses, treatments that could protect entire populations from the most deadly toxins in the galaxy. In the wrong hands, that information could be reverse-engineered into weapons of mass destruction. "We weren't lost," Dr. Korvik continued, his scientific mind working through the terrifying implications. "We were driven here. They chased us into the nebula, knowing we'd be trapped. We were bait in their trap." Pilot Kung Su was already running tactical calculations, his experienced eyes taking in the approaching fleet's formation and speed. The numbers appeared on his screen like a death sentence written in cold mathematics. 12-1 odds, he reported to the captain. "In open space with clear maneuvering room, we'd be reduced to vapor in minutes. Their ships outgun us by a factor of 20. The human crew exchanged glances, each understanding that they faced an impossible situation. The Hegemony Raiders had chosen their hunting ground carefully. The nebula that had protected the humans from galactic persecution was now about to become their tomb. But Captain Jiho studied the swirling energy patterns around them with the calculating eye of someone who had spent decades surviving in impossible conditions. His weathered face showed not fear, but the focused intensity of a predator analyzing its environment. "Good thing we're not in open space," he said quietly, a dangerous smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "This nebula isn't just our prison, it's our weapon." He turned to address his crew with the calm authority that had carried them through countless dangerous missions. "Hannah, get your Marines ready for boarding actions. Full combat gear and emergency patches for hull breaches. Hyunwoo, I need every engineering trick your brilliant mind can devise. We're going to use this cosmic storm against them." The humans began preparing for a battle they mathematically shouldn't survive, their movements efficient and determined. There was no panic, no desperate attempts to flee. Instead, They worked with the cold professionalism of soldiers who had accepted death, but refused to go quietly. Dr. Korvik watched in amazement as these supposed savages transformed into protectors. Any rational species would have immediately abandoned the Villani and fled to safety. The humans could easily escape, while the raiders were focused on capturing the research data. Why? He asked Captain Jiho directly, his compound eyes reflecting genuine confusion. You could escape right now. Leave us and live to see your families again. No one would blame you. Medic Sumen looked up from her emergency medical preparations, her expression showing quiet determination, mixed with something the alien botanist was beginning to recognize as human compassion. That's not who we are, she answered simply, as if the question itself was absurd. We don't abandon people who need help. That's not what humans do. Engineer Hyunwoo nodded in agreement, while installing additional shielding around the Villani ship's critical systems. Earth taught us that survival isn't just about staying alive, he added. It's about making sure the right things survive. As the hegemony raiders closed in for what should have been an easy capture, they had no idea they were about to face something the galaxy had never seen before. Humans who treated certain death as just another problem to solve, and who would rather die fighting than live with dishonor. The trap was about to become a battlefield, and Earth's children were ready to show the universe what Deathworlders really meant. The hegemony fleet commander, Admiral Zektar, smiled with predatory satisfaction as his ships entered the nebula's outer edge. His intelligence reports had been clear. One small human vessel and a disabled Villani research ship, easy prey for his 12 heavily armed warships. Maintain formation, he ordered his captains. Disable the human ship, but don't destroy it. I want to see what these famous Deathworlders look like when they surrender. But as his fleet pushed deeper into the cosmic storm, something felt wrong. The nebula that had seemed like a perfect trap for the humans was proving surprisingly difficult to navigate. His ships, built for conventional space warfare, struggled with the chaotic energy patterns and gravitational distortions. Sir, we're having trouble maintaining sensor lock, his tactical officer reported. The radiation interference is worse than expected. Admiral Zektar waved dismissively. It doesn't matter. 12 ships against one. This will be over in minutes. He couldn't have been more wrong. The first sign that this wasn't going to be a typical raid came when the Indomitables simply vanished from their sensors. One moment it was there, damaged and helpless. The next it had disappeared completely into the swirling cosmic storm. Where did they go? The Admiral demanded, staring at the empty tactical display. His answer came in the form of weapons. Fire erupting from a radiation stream that should have been impossible to hide in. The human ship appeared like a ghost, its guns blazing as it targeted the lead hegemony vessel's engine section with surgical precision. Target their lead ship's engines, Captain Jiho ordered calmly as the Indomitable emerged from the particle stream like a predator striking from ambush. Hyunwoo, overload their sensors with that electromagnetic pulse. The human engineer's fingers danced over his controls, channeling the nebula's own chaotic energy into a focused burst that temporarily blinded half the enemy fleet. Before the raiders could react, the Indomitable had already melted back into the cosmic maelstrom, leaving only confused sensor readings and one crippled warship. Pilot Kung Su flew their ship through gravitational shears that would have torn apart any vessel not built to Earth's brutal standards. He used the stellar phenomena as weapons, leading enemy ships into crushing gravity wells and superheated particle streams that cooked their hulls from the outside in. This is impossible, Admiral Zektar snarled as he watched his tactical display show impossible maneuvers. No ship can survive those gravitational forces. They should be dead. But the humans weren't just surviving, they were thriving. Where the hegemony ships saw deadly obstacles, the crew of the Indomitable saw tactical opportunities. Every radiation storm became camouflage, Every gravitational anomaly became a weapon. Every chunk of stellar debris became cover. The deadly game of cat and mouse continued through the nebula's twisted geography. The Indomitable would appear without warning, strike hard at a vulnerable target, then vanish before the enemy could coordinate a response. Traditional fleet tactics meant nothing in this environment, where only the adaptability bred by surviving Earth's countless dangers could navigate such chaos. Second ship, disabled, Communications Officer Jisoo reported as another hegemony vessel, limped away with its weapons systems destroyed. They're trying to form a defensive formation, but the gravitational distortions are breaking up their coordination. Engineer Hunwoo worked frantically at his station, rerouting power through backup systems as the extreme conditions took their toll on even the Indomitable's sturdy construction. Warning lights flashed across his board as gravitational stress, fractured hull plating, and radiation exposure burned through shielding. Hull breach on Deck 7, he announced with characteristic calm, but we're still flying and fighting. Damage, report. Captain Jiho called over the sound of groaning metal. Hyunwoo flashed his trademark grin, the same expression he wore when fixing impossible problems in Earth's harshest environments. We're held together by stubbornness and spare parts, sir. Just how I like it. The human crew laughed, despite their desperate situation. This was what they'd been trained for, taking impossible odds and finding a way to win through sheer determination and creative thinking. Marine Sergeant Hannah studied the tactical situation from her position at the weapons console. They're getting frustrated, she observed, making mistakes. Admirals probably never fought an enemy that refuses to play by conventional rules. Dr. Korvik watched from his position in the protected section of the ship, his scientific mind struggling to process what he was witnessing. These humans were fighting a numerically superior force in one of the most dangerous regions of space, and they were winning through tactics no civilized military would ever consider. How are they doing this? He asked Medic Sumin, who was monitoring both human and Vellani crew members for radiation exposure. Earth doesn't breed soldiers, she replied, checking her readings. It breeds survivors. People who look at a deadly situation and find a way to turn it into an advantage. Outside, the battle raged through the cosmic storm, as humanity proved once again that sometimes the most dangerous predator isn't the biggest or strongest, it's the one that refuses to give up and knows how to use its environment as a weapon. The hegemony fleet was learning a hard lesson about what happened when you cornered Earth's children in their element. The battle had been raging for nearly an hour when disaster struck with the screaming whistle of incoming torpedoes. Admiral Zektar, frustrated by his fleet's inability to pin down the elusive human ship, had ordered his remaining vessels to target the disabled Vellani research vessel instead. If we can't catch the ghosts, we'll destroy what they're protecting. He snarled over the communication channels. 3 heavy torpedoes slammed into the gentle current with devastating force. The explosion lit up the nebula like a miniature star, sending shockwaves through both ships. On the human vessel, everyone was thrown against bulkheads as the concussion wave hit them. Dr. Korvik felt his world literally falling apart as his ship's hull ruptured in multiple places. The sweet, life-giving atmosphere that had sustained his research team began venting into the cold vacuum of space through jagged tears in the metal plating. Emergency bulkheads engaging, announced the ship's automated systems in the calm voice that all spacecraft computers used, regardless of how dire the situation became. But the bulkheads, designed to contain minor breaches, couldn't seal fast enough. 3 of Dr. Korvik's team members had been in the botanical laboratory when the torpedoes hit. Now they were trapped in a section where the air was rapidly disappearing and deadly radiation from the nebula was pouring in through the damaged hull. Among the trapped was young Zeely, barely past her first molting, and the brightest student in their research program. Dr. Korvik could hear her terrified calls for help through the internal communication system before the radiation interference cut off all contact. We have to get them out. Dr. Korvik pleaded to the humans who had immediately rushed to assess the damage. Medic Sumin ran her scanners over the sealed bulkhead, her expression growing more grim by the second. The readings on her equipment painted a picture of death, radiation levels that would cook living tissue in minutes, atmospheric pressure dropping toward zero, and temperatures falling toward absolute cold. Radiation levels are lethal, she reported to Captain Jiho, her voice heavy with the weight of delivering impossible news. No organic being can survive in that environment. Even with full protective gear, exposure would be fatal within minutes. The bridge fell silent except for the distant sounds of the continuing space battle. Everyone understood what Sumin's words meant. The 3 trapped Villani were as good as dead. No rescue was possible under those conditions. Everyone except Engineer Hyun Woo. Define no one, he said grimly, already moving toward the emergency equipment lockers where the radiation suits were stored. Hyunwoo, don't be insane, Captain Jiho called after him. Those readings would kill even a human. Your nervous system would shut down before you made it halfway through that section. But the engineer was already pulling on the heaviest radiation protection suit aboard the ship, designed for emergency repairs in the most hostile environments. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, sealing connections and activating the suit's limited shielding systems. Maybe, he replied, through the suit's communication system, but maybe not. I've worked in the radiation zones around Jupiter's moons. I've repaired fusion reactors while they were still hot. This is just another engineering problem. Dr. Korvik watched in stunned silence as this human, this supposed savage from a death world, prepared to crawl into an environment that would kill any civilized species in minutes. The radiation levels were beyond anything in normal space, concentrated by the nebula's chaotic magnetic fields into a lethal soup of high-energy particles. The kids got maybe 10 minutes before the radiation stops our hearts, Hyunwoo said calmly, checking his suit's systems one final time. I can make it there and back in 8, if I don't waste time being careful. He disappeared into the damaged section through an emergency access hatch, his radiation badge already starting to change color from the exposure. Through the internal sensors, the crew could track his progress as he crawled through corridors, filled with deadly energy that was literally cooking the air. Around him, the radiation badge on his suit turned from green to yellow to red in the first minute. By the 3rd minute, it had gone black, indicating exposure levels that would cause immediate radiation sickness. By the 5th minute, the badge cracked and fell apart, its electronics fried by the intense energy bombardment. But Hyunwoo kept moving. When he emerged from the access hatch, carrying young Zeely in his arms, his hands were visibly shaking from radiation exposure. His suit's systems were failing, and warning lights flashed across every surface. Behind him came the other 2 rescued Villani, supported by the emergency oxygen he'd carried to them. Medical bay, now, Sumin ordered, her scanner showing dangerous radiation levels throughout Hyunwoo's body, but the engineer waved her off with trembling hands, even as his body fought the cellular damage from his exposure. Kid first, he insisted, his voice weak but determined. I can handle a few more rads. Make sure she's okay. Dr. Korvik knelt beside the young Villani student, tears in his compound eyes, as he realized she was alive and breathing. Around them, the battle continued to rage as human and hegemony forces traded fire through the cosmic storm. But in that moment, watching a human sacrifice his health to save an alien child, Dr. Korvik finally understood the truth that the Galactic Council had been too afraid to acknowledge. Your council was wrong about us, Captain Jiho said quietly, watching his engineer receive treatment for radiation poisoning while refusing to rest until he knew the Villani were safe. Earth didn't make us killers. It made us protectors. These weren't monsters from a death world. They were guardians forged by one. People who had learned from their harsh environment that the strong must protect the weak, no matter the cost, to themselves Admiral Zektar was beginning to taste victory when his tactical officer's panicked voice shattered his confidence. The battle against a single human ship had been frustrating, but manageable. They were slowly wearing down the Indomitable through sheer numbers. Soon the Deathworlders would have no choice but to surrender or be destroyed. "Sir, new contact." Emerging from the nebula's deep core, the officer reported, his voice cracking with stress. It's another human vessel." The Admiral's blood ran cold as he watched his sensors paint the image of a second Earthship materializing from the cosmic storm like a predator emerging from tall grass. This one was larger than the Indomitable, built along similar lines, but with heavier armor and more weapons. Captain Mincio's voice crackled over the communication channels, cutting through the static of the nebula's interference with casual confidence that made the hegemony commander's skin crawl. "Sorry we're late, Jiho," she said, as if she was apologizing for being delayed at a friendly gathering. Traffic was absolute murder getting through those gravitational shears. "Better late than never," Captain Jiho responded, and Admiral Zek could hear the relief and satisfaction in the human's voice. "We saved you some targets." Now the hegemony fleet faced something they had never encountered in all their years of raiding peaceful merchants and research vessels. Coordinated Deathworlders operating as a unified pack. The two human ships immediately began moving in perfect harmony, covering each other's movements with an instinctive precision that spoke of years of training together. "Minseo, take your ship against the flanking squadron," Captain Jiho ordered, his tactical mind already analyzing the new situation. "We'll continue drawing fire from their main force." "Copy that, old friend," Captain Minseo replied, her ship diving into the nebula's chaotic energy streams. These raiders definitely picked the wrong nebula to hunt in. The Resilient emerged from a radiation storm directly behind 3 hegemony vessels, catching them completely off guard, while they struggled to turn their heavy warships to face this new threat. The Indomitable struck from the opposite direction, trapping them in a deadly crossfire. Admiral Zektar watched his carefully planned ambush fall apart as the humans demonstrated tactics his military academy had never taught, where his ships relied on rigid formations and predictable strategies. The Deathworlders fought with fluid adaptability that turned the nebula's hazards into weapons. "They're not following any known tactical doctrine," his weapons officer reported in confusion. "Their attack patterns keep changing based on the local gravitational conditions." The hegemony's rigid military hierarchy, designed for conventional space warfare, simply couldn't adapt to the humans' improvised fighting style. Their ships, built for battles in clean space, with clear lines of sight, struggled desperately with the nebula's chaotic environment, while the Earth vessels thrived in the cosmic storm. Marine Sergeant Hannah coordinated boarding actions across multiple enemy ships simultaneously, her tactical genius allowing her to track 6 different assault teams at once. Each team struck at the most vulnerable points: command centers, engineering sections, and communication arrays. "Target their command centers first," she instructed her Marines over the tactical network. Without coordination between their ships, they're just expensive pieces of scrap metal floating in space. The boarding actions were swift and decisive. Human Marines, trained to fight in Earth's most hostile environments, found the sterile corridors of hegemony warships almost comfortable by comparison. They moved through the enemy vessels like ghosts, disabling key systems and capturing officers before the raiders could organize effective resistance. Dr. Korvik watched the tactical display in amazement as the tide of battle shifted completely. What had seemed like humanity's certain doom was becoming a devastating defeat for the hegemony fleet. The coordination between the 2 human ships was almost supernatural. They anticipated each other's moves, covered each other's weaknesses, and struck with deadly precision at exactly the right moments. "How are they doing this?" he asked Communications Officer Jisoo, who was monitoring the battle from her station. "Pack hunters," she replied simply. "Humans evolved as cooperative, predators. When we work together, we become something greater than the sum of our parts. One by one, hegemony vessels began limping away from the engagement, their hulls scarred by weapons fire, and their crews demoralized by defeats they couldn't understand. Admiral Zektar found himself facing a choice between total destruction and tactical retreat. All ships, withdraw to minimum safe distance, he ordered, his voice bitter with the taste of failure. Regroup for ... reassessment. As the last raider disappeared into the nebula's outer regions, the cosmic storm fell silent except for the steady hum of human engines. The two Earth ships hung in space near the damaged Vellani research vessel, their crews already beginning rescue and repair operations. Captain Mincio's voice came over the communication channel, warm with satisfaction. Well, that was educational. Think they learned their lesson about hunting in our territory? If they didn't, Captain Jiho replied, watching the retreating enemy fleet on his sensors. They'll get another chance to learn it the hard way. The commanders of the hegemony fleet finally understood why the galaxy had quarantined Earth for 20 years. Not because humans were uncontrollable savages who couldn't be trusted among civilized species, but because they were absolutely unstoppable. When they were protecting something they cared about, the Deathworlders had come home, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so packed with representatives from across the galaxy. Every seat was filled, and countless more beings watched through holographic displays that stretched across 1,000 different worlds. 3 cycles had passed since the rescue in the Kythera Nebula, and the galaxy was finally ready to hear the truth about the mysterious humans. Dr. Korvik stood at the center of the enormous chamber, his forearms steady, despite the magnitude of what he was about to reveal. For 20 years, every species in the galaxy had been told the same story about Earth's children, that they were savage monsters from a death world, too violent and unpredictable to be trusted among civilized beings. Today, he would shatter that lie forever. Honored delegates, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. I stand before you as someone who believed every story, every warning, every piece of propaganda about the species we call humans. I was taught to fear them as monsters. I was told they were killers who solved every problem with violence. The botanical scientist activated the holographic display system, and images began flowing across the massive screens that surrounded the chamber. The recordings showed scenes from inside the damaged gentle current, humans working tirelessly to repair alien systems they'd never seen before, sharing their precious food rations with hungry Vellani children, treating injured researchers with gentle care. These are the monsters we were warned about, Dr. Korvik said, his voice thick with emotion as the images continued. Watch how they cradle our wounded. See how they share their own supplies with strangers who had been taught to hate them. The chamber fell silent as delegates watched Engineer Han Wu crawling through lethal radiation to save young Zeely, his own body absorbing doses that would cause permanent damage. They saw Medic Sumin working for hours to treat Vellani injuries with equipment designed for human physiology. They witnessed Marine Sergeant Hannah reading botanical texts to frightened children, her supposedly savage nature revealed as protective compassion. When the hegemony raiders came for us, Dr. Korvik continued, when death surrounded us in that cosmic storm, who fought to save us? The monsters. They bled for us. They absorbed lethal radiation for us. They would have died for us. And they asked for nothing in return. The council chambers buzzed with uncomfortable whispers as delegates struggled to reconcile these images with decades of anti-human propaganda. The evidence was undeniable, recorded by the Vellani ship's own systems, yet it contradicted everything they had been taught to believe. Council leader, Prime, an ancient being whose species had helped establish the quarantine 20 years ago, watched the recordings with growing shame. Her government had painted humans as barely controlled savages to justify keeping them isolated. Now she faced proof that Earth's children possessed a nobility that most so-called civilized species had never achieved. The massive chamber doors opened with a resonant hum, and Captain Jiho entered with his crew walking behind him. Every delegate in the hall turned to stare, many seeing humans in person for the first time in their lives. The assembled aliens had expected to see the monsters from their nightmares, towering brutes with weapons and scars, creatures that radiated violence and menace. Instead, they saw people, tired people, scarred from their ordeal in the nebula, but carrying themselves with quiet dignity that spoke of inner strength rather than savage brutality. Captain Jiho looked like what he was, a seasoned space captain who had spent decades protecting others. His crew appeared professional, competent, and surprisingly, normal. Engineer Hanwoo still showed signs of radiation exposure from his rescue of the Villani child. Medic Sumin carried herself with the gentle confidence of someone dedicated to preserving life. Marine Sergeant Hannah, supposedly a trained killer, looked more like a guardian than a warrior. They were undeniably formidable, but not in the way the galaxy had been taught to fear. "They don't look like monsters," whispered one delegate to another, confusion evident in their translated words. Council Leader Prime rose from her ceremonial seat, her ancient voice carrying across the silent chamber. The next words she spoke would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. "The quarantine was a mistake," she announced, each word falling like a hammer blow. "For 20 years, we have kept humanity isolated based on fear and prejudice. But they have proven beyond any doubt that they belong among the stars, not as conquerors seeking to dominate, but as protectors willing to shield the innocent." As the formal ceremonies concluded and Earth's ships were officially welcomed to join the Council fleet, something fundamental shifted in galactic consciousness. Species that had feared humans for decades began to understand a truth that would change everything. Sometimes the galaxy needed Deathworlders, not as weapons of war to be pointed at enemies, but as shields against the darkness that lurked between the stars. The humans hadn't conquered their hostile world through violence alone. They had learned from it the most important lesson any species could master. The strong must protect the weak. The pack defends all who cannot defend themselves, regardless of species or origin. Dr. Korvik watched from the observation deck as human ships took their places alongside vessels from across the galaxy. These weren't the monsters that had haunted childhood stories for 20 years. They were guardians, forged by a harsh world that had taught them to value life above all else. In a galaxy full of predators, both natural and artificial, humanity had finally come home. And for the first time in decades, the civilized worlds felt truly safe. Knowing that Earth's children were watching over them, the age of quarantine was over. The age of cooperation had begun, and somewhere in the depths of space, other threats that had grown bold during humanity's absence began to reconsider their plans. Knowing that the galaxy's most dedicated protectors were back where they belonged, standing guard between the darkness and the light. The end.